Welcome to Waterford Property Watch. I'm delighted to introduce John Darcy, my esteemed colleague, who is with us almost 3 years. John worked in corporate financial banking with a Dutch bank, and now he is our portfolio manager here in Liberty Blue. Thanks, John, for joining me.
Thanks, Regina.
Isn't this your video debut?
It sure is.
Yes. John, you're studying real estate at the moment. You're in your second year. Are you loving it?
I am indeed.
And tell me, you're involved on the committee level with the Irish Property Owners Association. What is the Irish Property Owners Association all about?
So the Irish Property Owners Association was founded almost just over 30 years ago by a small collective of people. I suppose for me, I see it as a group, a single collective that speak on behalf of small property owners and landlords throughout Ireland. So they have information evenings at different points around Ireland. So on the 2nd of October, there's going to be one in Cork. So members in Cork can go and pose questions. And they also speak at government level. So they lobby the government and politicians to try and influence legislation going forward for small property owners.
Very good. I'm a big fan of the IPOA. And Mary Conway, who's a good friend of yours, John, is often on the radio speaking about all things in relation to legislation and issues for both property owners and tenants.
Yeah, so Mary sits on the committee as the chairwoman. So Mary is often featured on both print and the radio, and she will give an opinion on new legislation, or I say recently there was a lot of scams taking place for students, so she'll be giving advice to students or other cross sections of society on how to best put their best foot forward. And also obviously will be speaking on behalf of the landlord or the small property owner when there's new legislation coming out or there's something topical. Yeah,
she's a very important voice. Funny enough, we were only talking to Mary Conway on the phone just before the video, and she was talking about the problems with the RTB. What do you see the problems with the RTB being, John?
Well, I suppose with the RTB, the problems we encounter most frequently with them, if someone is overholding on a termination notice, which is getting quite problematic at the moment because there's such a level of landlords exiting the market, you could be waiting for up to 12 weeks in some instances to meet a mediator. And then you could have further overholding if it has to go to an in-person or online hearing for an adjudication. But also, if someone is not paying their rent, you have to give a warning notice 28 days, and then you have to give another notice of termination on the grounds of not paying rent, another 28 days. So in effect, there's 2 months of free rent, and then the process behind that. Now, thankfully in Liberty Blue, we don't encounter that problem too much because we vet our tenants very well, and we obviously keep on top of the tenants if they're not paying the rent on time.
John, there's been new legislation enacted and we're looking at March 2026. Talk to me about what does this mean for property owners and tenants alike? Okay,
so the new legislation has been drafted, put together by the government just before they went on their summer break, okay? So what it looks like, so any tenant that's in a tenancy at the moment, it's a current government guidelines. It will be there for them until they move to a new tenancy or the landlord re-rents the house if they leave of their own accord, okay? So if a new tenant goes in March 1st, 2026, first and foremost, I suppose for the landlord, the positive here is the rent can be reset to market rent, because obviously with the rent pressure zones, a lot of properties are much under market rent, which is skewing the data we're seeing published in the media all the time, okay? And then the tenant security, I suppose, is being protected here with the new legislation. It's a 6-year tenancy. So for 6 years, a tenant has the opportunity to stay in that house unless there's very specific reasons. For example, a small landlord with properties of 3 or less can only give notice if they're going to move back into the house themselves or a very close family member is moving back in, and they have to get a statutory declaration signed by their solicitor or peace commissioner. That's how we see it at the moment.
So can a small property owner sell their rental property once after, let's say a tenant moves in March, and at Christmas next year they decide they want to sell the property? Can they sell the property?
Regina, yes, they can sell the property, but they have to sell it to another investor. So you can't, at the moment, you can get a statutory declaration and a notice of termination signed by you, the landlord, and either a peace commissioner and or a solicitor, and you give them, in the main, it's 6 months. You give a tenant notice to vacate the property. But next year, if you want to sell, you have to sell it with a tenant in situ, and you'll have to sell it to a landlord in the main.
So what I'm hearing is that the key differences are today, if you have a property rented and you wish to sell the property, you give notice, a statutory declaration, the correct notice set out by the RTB, and you can ask the tenant to leave if you're selling the property or you wish to move into the property.
Yes.
However, come March, any tenancies after March, you can sell the property, but you must sell it with tenant in situ.
Yes.
Unless you are moving into it or you're maybe immediate family member.
Precisely.
Okay. John, with the new legislation, there's obviously downsides. What are they in your views?
I suppose, Regina, if a landlord places a tenant into their property and 12 months later they have to sell it for a whole host of reasons, it could be, and they come to me and they say, look, John, can Regina and Maria sell the property for us? I would say, yes, they can, but it has to be to another landlord. So the tenant will be staying in situ. But the problem here is the capital value is going to be affected because obviously a homeowner won't be able to buy it. So it's a smaller pool of people that will be able to bid on the property, essentially, Regina.
And would you be of the view that houses will be impacted more than apartments?
Yes, in the main, houses are being bought by homeowners because obviously people need a place to live. We are all of the understanding there's a housing shortage. So most of the properties we're selling that are houses are all going back to family home status, basically.
Which will be very difficult with the new legislation.
Precisely.
Now, of course, if the tenant decides to leave themselves, can the landlord sell the property after March 2026?
Yeah, so if there's a no-fault eviction, so as in a tenant decides to leave themselves, then they are entitled to do as they wish with the property. Like if we had a vacant property, now if someone leaves a property, it's the same rule applies.
It seems like an obvious thing, but I just wanted to make it clear for people watching.
Yeah, of course.
And in terms of the upsides, what are the upsides, if any, in the legislation for property owners and tenants?
Yeah, so of course. So for example, one of our landlords owns a property here in the city centre, a 2-bedroom apartment in a very nice development. Their rent is currently €567. So it's very, very much below market value. So if their tenant decides to leave in March 1st, 2026, and they come to me and they say they want to re-rent it, we'll be able to go in at market rent, which will enable them to hold on to the property a lot longer because it's a more viable opportunity for them.
That makes total sense. And there is a difference between a small landlord and a big landlord. Yes. Can you talk to us about what that looks like?
Yeah, so I suppose a small landlord is any landlord that has 3 tenancies or less. So this becomes very very topical for someone that owns a property, say an old pre-63, and there could be 8 tenancies in the block. Automatically, they only own 1 building, but there's 8 tenancies in it. So as soon as they go 4 or more, they're into a large landlord. So that means that there is, within the 6-year period of the tenancies, you cannot give reason to terminate under any circumstances when you're a large landlord.
But the tenants can leave of their own choice.
The tenants can leave. And of course, if a tenant is breaching their obligation for paying rent, or if they're not maintaining the property, or if there's antisocial behaviour, those rules obviously still apply. You still have to meet your obligations.
And what are the upsides for the tenants?
The upsides for the tenant, of course, is they have security of tenure for the 6 years, as we've already discussed. There's only a very small pool of reasons that you can get a tenant to terminate a tenancy. So it's only really the only way you can move back to get back your property is if you're going to move back into a close family member, and that has to be proven by a statutory declaration with your solicitor or peace commissioner.
John, I want to ask you, in your own professional capacity here in Liberty Blue, you manage the rental portfolio here, and also in your capacity as a committee member on the Irish Property Owners Association group. What impact do you believe this legislation is going to have on the overall rental supply in Ireland?
Thanks, Regina. That's a great question. I think really the supply is going to tighten dramatically. In 1 week here in Liberty Blue, unfortunately, I had to write up 12 termination notices. Like, that's 12 families getting terminations, and our job is now trying to find those families more properties for them to live in. That's a very difficult position for everyone to be involved in. And it's not just in our office. This is being emulated all over the country, because I speak to agents and landlords all over the country on a regular basis as part of my role in the Irish Property Owners Association and here in Liberty Blue as well. I like to keep in touch to see what's happening on the ground.
So whilst they've tried to improve things for tenants, your opinion is that they're going to make it worse?
Yes, I do think so. As, you know, especially the accidental landlord that might hold on to the property for another 2, 3, 4 years. They're now going to really think when they have a tenancy coming up, when the property's coming vacant, do I really want to enter into another 6-year agreement?
I have to say, I would agree with John wholeheartedly. I think the legislation, whilst trying to help tenants in terms of security of tenure, I think it will actually have the opposite impact. We're seeing more and more property owners selling their properties because they don't want to be shackled with long-term leases. They don't want the uncertainty of legislation changes. However, John, is there still an opportunity for people to buy rental properties and to do well and smart investments? What are your thoughts?
Well, I suppose any individual or company owner that has a pension pot would be very well placed to invest in property. You know, there's serious tax advantages when you buy a property to your pension, and Waterford has many opportunities that are very advantageous to someone buying through their pension. So, for example, recently we had a client and they came to us to buy a property through their pension. They will be achieving a rental yield of in excess of 10%, and all the rent is rolling into the pension without any tax liability. But the biggest advantage of all is when they go to sell that property in, say, 10 years' time, because most people are buying through their pension, it's more of a long-term view they're taking. So when they go to sell the unit in 10 years' time, any capital appreciation is not subjected to capital gains liability, which is a huge saving because it's 33% currently of the gain on the property.
Absolutely. So there is a great way to invest. And I think it's also important to highlight that client that you helped purchase the property through another agent in Waterford.
Yes.
And you might wonder, well, why did we help them? Because we will be renting and managing that property for them.
Yeah, so we have a number of existing clients, and they're coming to a point in their life where they do have a pension pot built, and they have obviously a rapport with me or you or Maria or one of the team, and they'll come to us and they'll be discussing their plans, and this often comes up as an alternative investment opportunity within their pension.
One that the government doesn't overly advertise. Great opportunity. That said, John, thank you. And well done on your video debut. You did a great job.
Thank you.
And we're very lucky to have you as part of the team. As I always say, Garv Mila Mahagat and Slán go fóill.